The drums of rain hammered Ezinwa like war. Under the village Iroko, a crowd closed in faces sharp with judgment, umbrellas snapping like wings. Amaka stood barefoot in a crooked white dress breath, shivering, as Uncle Bartho jabbed a finger at the stranger beside her. "You toyed with our girl," he thundered. Elders lifted a worn Bible. Mama Urena hissed, "Pay or disappear." Chinedu's jaw tightened, palms scarred from weeks on the farm, eyes holding a storm of their own. Lightning split the sky. "Marriage today," the chief declared before honor drowns. Gasps. Someone shoved a bride price ledger into the rain. Amaka's lips trembled, not from guilt, but from the weight of years sleeping on a kitchen floor. Chinedu stepped forward, voice steady over thunder. "I will not let her be sold." The wind died for a heartbeat, as if listening. He reached for her hand. Somewhere far away, engines growled on a road that had never seen black SUVs. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and your local time, and if this story grips you, gently tap subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. The rain eased to a whisper, but its echo stayed trapped between the trees and the murmurs of the crowd. Amaka's fingers trembled inside Chinedu's hand, her eyes darting between faces she'd known all her life, faces that now looked like strangers, cold and hungry for spectacle. Uncle Bartho's voice cracked through the hush like a whip. "You think kindness makes you special, girl? You think a poor farmer can save you from shame?" He spat the word shame as if it could drown her. Chinedu turned to face him, his soaked shirt clinging to a frame carved by years of quiet strength. "I didn't come here to steal your niece's honor," he said calmly, though his heart pounded like thunder beneath his ribs. "But I will not stand by while she's traded like grain at the market." The elders murmured among themselves, shifting on their wooden stools. The air smelled of wet earth and palm oil. Papa Okwu, the oldest among them, leaned forward, his gray beard dripping with rain. "Young man," he said, "your words are bold. But in this village, bold words are cheap. Are you ready to prove your intentions before witnesses?" "I am," Chinedu said. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing a small leather pouch that held far more money than a farmer should ever own. The truth of who he was pressed against his palm like a secret flame. But he wasn't ready, not yet. Not until Amaka was free. Beside him, Amaka lowered her gaze. The muddy ground beneath her toes was cold, but not colder than the life she was about to leave behind. She had grown up in this compound, fetching water at dawn, scrubbing pots until her hands cracked, sleeping beside smoke and rats. Now, with one word, these same people wanted to marry her off to a man they barely knew. She should have been terrified, but when Chinedu spoke, her fear softened into something strange, something warm. Papa Okwu nodded solemnly. "Then the law of Ezinwa shall decide," he said, lifting his hand. "The girl will be his wife by evening, the bride price 60,000 naira, paid in full before the drums stop tonight." Gasps cut through the air. Even Auntie Urena blinked, her greed flickering into disbelief. 60,000! That's more than a harvest, but Bartho's eyes gleamed. "He's been strutting like a peacock since he came," he sneered. "Let's see if he can back his pride with coin." Chinedu didn't flinch. "You'll have your money," he said. "Every naira." The words left his mouth before his mind could catch them. For a moment the world seemed to tilt. Then the elders rose and the crowd scattered to prepare. The rain began again, softer this time, as if blessing the madness. When the last villager left, Amaka turned to him, eyes wide. "Why did you agree?" she whispered. "You owe them nothing." He hesitated. The truth perched on his tongue like a restless bird. "Because I owe myself peace," he thought. But what he said was simpler. "Because you deserve more than chains, Amaka. And if I walk away, they'll find someone worse." She blinked back tears. "You don't even know me." "Then I'll start learning," he said quietly. "If you let me." That night, the village buzzed with gossip. Smoke rose from cooking fires, blending with the scent of roasted yam and thunder. In a small hut behind the compound, Amaka sat alone while Auntie Urena barked orders outside. The older woman's laughter rang sharp as broken glass. "Who would have thought," she said to her daughters, "that foolish Orphan would fetch us 60,000? The gods have eyes, after all." Amaka pressed her palms together. "The gods have eyes," she whispered too, but her words were not of greed. They were a prayer for strength. Across the village, Chinedu sat by a dim lantern in Papa Okwu's guest room. His phone, hidden beneath layers of cloth, vibrated once his assistant's coded message, confirming the transfer of funds. "All done, sir," it read. "No one will trace it to Lagos." He exhaled slowly. He had built empires in secret, survived betrayal and boardroom wars. But this small village ritual felt heavier than all of it, because for the first time someone's freedom depended on him. Before dawn, the drums began to sound. Amaka was dressed in a plain white cloth, sewn the night before, wrinkled uneven and smelling faintly of kerosene. Her hair was tied back with a frayed ribbon. When she looked in the cracked mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked poor, but because she looked resigned. Madame Urena entered, adjusting her geo with pride. "Don't act pitiful, girl. A man is paying for you. That makes you worth something for once." Amaka didn't respond. She had learned long ago that silence was her only defense. Outside, the village gathered again beneath the big Iroko tree. The sun struggled through gray clouds, painting everything in a dull silver glow. Papa Okwu stood in the center, Bible in hand, voice deep and rhythmic, as he recited the vows. "Do you, Chinedu, take Amaka as your wife before the eyes of men and the gods?" "I do, Chinedu," said his voice firm. "Do you, Amaka, take this man as your husband?" Amaka hesitated. Her throat tightened. She thought of her parents, of the fire of years spent swallowing pain. Then she looked up at him, the man who had faced a village storm for her. "I do," she whispered. At that exact moment, lightning flashed and the sky cracked open. Rain poured down in wild sheets, drenching everyone. People screamed and ran for shelter, but Papa Okwu kept reading, water dripping from his chin. "May the heavens bless what man cannot understand." Chinedu removed his wrapper and draped it over Amaka's shoulders. "Come," he said softly. "Let's find shelter." Uncle Bartho appeared, his face twisted with greed and triumph. "Take her," he said. "She's yours now. And remember, no refunds." They walked away through the storm, their steps heavy, their silence louder than thunder. The world behind them blurred into gray and mud. When they reached Papa Okwu's compound, the old man's wife gasped. "God have mercy, look at them like spirits washed ashore." She ushered them inside, handed Amaka a wrapper and a bowl of steaming tea. The warmth hit her chest, chasing away the chill. "Rest," the old woman said gently. "You are safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign. Later that night, as the rain eased, Chinedu showed her to a small room behind the kitchen, a square of cracked walls, an old mattress, one small window. "It's not much," he said, ashamed. Amaka smiled faintly. "It's more than I've ever had." He watched her lay down, exhaustion softening her face. Outside, frogs croaked and crickets hummed, a strange symphony of peace after chaos. He lay on the floor beside the bed, staring at the roof. "Chinedu," she whispered after a while. "Yes, why did you really marry me?" He turned his head toward her, meeting her eyes in the dark. "Because you gave water to a stranger when you had none for yourself." She didn't reply, but tears rolled down silently, disappearing into the pillow. Hours later, when the lantern died, a soft wind brushed through the cracks in the wall, carrying with it the scent of wet soil and palm leaves. In that small room, two broken lives rested side by side, unaware that their story had already begun to rewrite the fate of everyone in Ezimwa. Outside, deep in the village, a pair of eyes watched their window flicker out. Madame Urena whispered to her husband, "Let them enjoy tonight. Soon his kindness will dry like rain on stone." But in the darkness, where the sound of the storm still lingered, something else was being born, quiet, fragile, and unbreakable hope. Dawn crawled over Ezimwa like a weary traveler, its light trembling through mist and mud. The storm had left puddles that mirrored the sky, and from the small back room of Papa Okwu's compound came the faint crackle of a cooking fire. Amaka was already awake, sweeping the damp floor with a bundle of palm leaves. Her dress clung to her knees, and her hair was still damp from the night before. She moved quietly, careful not to wake. Chinedu, who slept, curled near the door, one arm resting over his chest like a man guarding an invisible wound. She paused for a moment, studying him. Even in sleep, his face carried something heavy, a mix of grief and gentleness she didn't understand. No man had ever spoken to her with respect before. No one had ever called her worthy. That word alone had shattered something inside her. Something she hadn't realized was still breakable. When he stirred, she quickly turned away and went to light the fire. The smell of smoke filled the air. Moments later, his voice came from behind her, soft and rough with sleep. "Good morning." She nearly dropped the firewood. "Good morning, sir," he smiled faintly. "Sir, you'll make me feel like an old man. Just Chinedu." She hesitated, then nodded. "Good morning, Chinedu." He rose, stretched, and looked around the small room. "I'll go fetch water," he said, reaching for the clay pot. Her eyes widened. "No, let me. It's women's work." He turned his gaze steady. "Not in my house. In my house, we share the work." Amaka froze. No one had ever said such a thing in her presence, not Papa Bartho, not Auntie Urena, not any man in the village. In her world, women bent while men commanded. Yet here stood a man who spoke as though equality was as natural as breathing. "Sit," he said gently. "You've done enough." She watched him disappear into the morning fog pot, balanced easily on his shoulder. And for the first time she allowed herself to breathe without fear. The days that followed settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. Chinedu worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset, clearing land, repairing fences, teaching Papa Okwu's sons better planting methods. Amaka helped Mama Okwu cook for the workers, swept the compound, and spent evenings washing clothes by the stream. Sometimes when she was sure no one was watching, she hummed songs her mother used to sing, a melody soft as prayer. Chinedu often came home late, shoulders coated with dust, and found her sitting near the firelight waiting with his dinner. Their conversations were short at first, polite, uncertain. But as the nights grew longer, the silence between them began to soften. "Do you ever miss your family?" she asked one evening, as she handed him a bowl of yam porridge. His spoon paused midair. The question landed heavier than she knew. "Every day," he said quietly. She nodded, staring into the fire. "Me too." After a long pause, he added, "What do you remember about them?" She smiled sadly. "My father smelled of palm, wine, and rain. My mother always sang when she cooked. They loved each other like sunrise and sunset, never meeting but always together." Chinedu looked at her, then really looked. "You remember them with love, not bitterness." "I promised myself never to forget, Joy," she said simply. "Even when the world forgot me." Her words struck him like a psalm. For years his life had been built on vengeance, a fire that kept him alive but never warm. Yet this girl, with nothing but her scars and her soft smile, carried peace like a hidden jewel. A week later, whispers began to ripple through the village. "The orphan girl lives like a queen. Her husband washes plates. Maybe she has bewitched him." Madame Urena fed those whispers with relish, her voice dripping venom at every market stall. She used her face to trap him, she told anyone who would listen. "That man will regret it. You'll see." But the more they spoke, the more the couple grew in quiet strength. Amaka taught the neighborhood children songs and stories under the shade of the mango tree. Chinedu repaired broken tools for villagers who couldn't afford new ones. Slowly, their small acts of kindness began to shift the air in Ezimwa. Still, not everyone rejoiced. One evening, a boy arrived at Papa Okwu's gate carrying a folded letter sealed with wax. "A message for the farmer," the boy said, eyes nervous. Chinedu took it, thanked him, and stepped into the shadows. Inside, written in sharp, slanted handwriting, were the words, "He still lives here, the man who destroyed your father. He hides behind church prayers and greed. Do not forget why you came." It was unsigned, but Chinedu knew. Someone in the village remembered. His fingers tightened around the paper until it tore. Later that night, Amaka noticed him sitting outside, lost in thought. "You look like the rain is inside your chest," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." She sat beside him, her wrapper brushing his arm. "You can talk to me." He hesitated, then said, "Have you ever wanted revenge?" Amaka's gaze drifted toward the moon. "When I was younger, yes. I dreamed of seeing Auntie Urena cry the way she made me cry. But then I realized, if I keep wishing for pain, I'll never stop feeling it." Her words sank deep, quieting something restless in him. "You're wiser than most," he said. "I'm just tired," she whispered, "tired of anger." That night, long after she slept, Chinedu sat awake. He thought about the man named Bartho, the thief who stole his father's fortune and dignity, who built his comfort on ashes. Every step Chinedu had taken into this village had been a step toward justice. But now, with Amaka's laughter echoing faintly from the room behind him, vengeance began to feel like a wound he no longer wanted to feed. One humid afternoon, Amaka went to the market to buy vegetables. The air smelled of spice and sweat, of sun-baked yams and roasted corn. She was reaching for tomatoes when a familiar voice froze her heart. "Well, well," Uncle Bartho said loudly, grinning at his friends. "Look who's risen from ashes." The kitchen girl who married a laborer. People turned. Amaka's throat tightened. Bartho laughed, slapping his knee. "Tell me, child, does your husband still scrub floors after work? Or has he taught you how to beg in English?" Laughter burst around her. Her hands shook, but she stayed silent. She picked up her basket and walked away. Bartho's voice chased her through the stalls. "No man stays with a beggar forever. You'll come crawling back soon enough." Outside the market, she collapsed under the shade of a tree chest, heaving. The noise, the shame, the years of buried humiliation crashed over her all at once. She pressed her face into her hands and wept. That was where Chinedu found her an hour later. Someone had told him she left the market early. When he saw her, trembling rage surged through him like wildfire. "Who hurt you?" he demanded. She shook her head. Please not here. But he had already guessed. The world around him narrowed to a single name, Bartho. The man he'd hunted for 3 years. The reason he came to Ezenwa. He clenched his fists, jaw tight. Amaka, I can't keep hiding the truth from you. She looked up, eyes swollen from crying. What truth? I didn't come to this village to farm, he said slowly. I came to find the man who destroyed my family, the one who stole everything from my father. She stared at him, confused. You mean Uncle Bartho? Yes. His voice trembled between anger and exhaustion. 15 years ago he ruined us. My father died of shame. My mother followed. I've been searching for him ever since. She stepped back, her heart pounding. So, you came here for revenge. I thought I did, he admitted, but then I met you. The silence between them stretched like a bridge made of glass. Finally she whispered, and now I don't know what I want, he said. Justice or peace. Her tears slowed. She placed a trembling hand on his chest. Then choose peace. Because vengeance will only steal what love is trying to build. He looked at her, and in that single gaze, the years of hatred began to loosen their grip. From a distance, the market still hummed. But beneath the mango tree where they stood, time seemed to pause. Chinedu exhaled the first true breath of freedom in 15 years. I choose peace, he said quietly. Amaka nodded, eyes shining through the remnants of her pain. Then maybe finally the rain will end. And for the first time since he arrived in Ezenwa, Chinedu felt the storm inside him begin to clear. Morning sunlight spilled gently across Ezenwa, bathing the muddy roads in gold. After days of heavy rain and heavier hearts, the village stirred with quiet curiosity. Word had traveled fast. The orphan girl's husband was not just any man. Gossip whispered through markets and along palm groves. He came for revenge, but found love instead. No one knew if it was true, but truth in Ezenwa always arrived slower than rumor. Amaka woke before dawn, her body aching from restless dreams. She had dreamt of fire again, her parents' house, the smoke curling like a serpent around her throat. But this time when she reached for help, it was Chinedu's hand pulling her from the flames. She awoke with tears on her cheeks. Outside, the world was damp and new. She could hear Chinedu's footsteps in the field behind the house, steady and sure. He had barely spoken since their confrontation under the mango tree. The truth he confessed, the years of pain, the hidden identity hung between them like fog. She couldn't decide if she was angry, grateful, or afraid. Perhaps all three. She found him kneeling beside a row of cassava plants, shirt soaked with dew. You've been out since sunrise, she said quietly. He looked up, sweat glistening on his forehead. Work clears the mind. She hesitated, then offered him a gourd of water. And does it clear the heart? He smiled faintly, a tired smile. Not yet. They stood in silence, the morning stretching between them. Finally, Amaka said, if you came here for justice, you have it. Everyone in this village knows what Uncle Bartho did now. His name is already poison. Chinedu leaned on his hoe eyes, thoughtful. Justice without mercy becomes another kind of wound. I've seen powerful men destroy others and call it righteousness. I don't want to become one of them. Then what will you do, she asked. I will build. Instead of break, he said simply. Something useful. Something good. The certainty in his tone steadied her. For the first time since she could remember, she saw a future that wasn't made of ashes. That afternoon, Amaka went to see Mama EJ, the old widow who lived near the well. The woman had always been kind to her, offering leftover soup when Auntie Urena starved her. Mama EJ greeted her with a smile, missing 2 front teeth. Ah, my daughter, marriage suits you. You glow like morning oil. Amaka laughed softly. Marriage hasn't changed me, Mama. It only gave me room to breathe. The old woman nodded. Sometimes that's all a woman needs, air that isn't borrowed. Amaka helped her shell groundnuts while children played nearby, their laughter echoing like bells. She spoke about wanting to teach the village girls how to read, maybe start small lessons under the mango tree. Mama EJ clapped her hands. A good idea. Our girls need more than chores and marriages. But not everyone shared that spirit. Later, as Amaka returned home carrying a basket of yams, she passed Auntie Urena sitting with her daughters at the market. Their laughter turned sharp when they saw her. So Madam Farmer's wife Urena sneered. Still pretending to be humble after catching herself a husband, Amaka kept walking. Oh, she's too proud to talk to us now, Mary, the younger one added. Maybe she thinks her husband's magic will buy her perfume. Urena's eyes gleamed with mischief. Careful, Mary. She might put that poor man under her spell the same way she fooled the elders. Their laughter followed her down the road like thorns. Amaka didn't turn around, but her steps grew faster. She could endure hunger, even beatings, but mockery still pierced like a blade. When she reached the compound, Chinadu was repairing the fence with Papa Okwu. He noticed her face immediately. "Who hurt you?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he said firmly. She hesitated, then whispered, "They said I trapped you, that you're bewitched." He chuckled softly. "Then maybe your kindness is the best magic I've ever known." She smiled despite herself. "You don't mind what people say." He looked at her seriously. "I used to care too much about voices that weren't mine. I lost everything chasing their approval. Not again." For a moment their eyes met, and something fragile, but powerful, settled between them. Trust. Days turned into weeks. Together they began to change the rhythm of Ezenwa. Chinadu helped repair the village well, using his hidden resources quietly through an anonymous donor. Amaka started evening lessons for girls under the mango tree, teaching letters with sticks drawn in the dirt. Children flocked to her laughter. Even the elders began to nod with quiet respect. But peace is fragile where envy breathes. One hot afternoon, as the sun burned white over the fields, a convoy of shiny motorbikes rolled into Ezenwa. The sound shattered the quiet like thunder. The villagers rushed to the road whispering, "Who are they, government people?" Chinadu stepped outside frowning. The bike stopped near the market square, and from the lead vehicle descended a tall man in a crisp white agbada, gold rings flashing on every finger. His smile was wide but hollow. Uncle Bartho. For weeks he had hidden from public shame, but greed had brought him back. His debts had grown, and he'd come seeking forgiveness or perhaps opportunity. He spotted Chinadu and raised both hands dramatically. "My son," he boomed. "You have every right to hate me, but I came to make peace," the crowd murmured. Chinadu's voice was calm. "Peace is not a speech, Bartho. It's change." Bartho's smile wavered. "I was young and foolish when I wronged your father. Take back what I stole. I will sign my land over to you." Chinadu shook his head. "I don't want your land." "What then, money?" No, Chinadu said firmly. "You will give it to the people you've cheated all your life, to the widows. To the children who fetch water for miles while you drink palm wine in shade." Bartho's face twisted. "You insult me in front of my people." "These are our people," Chinadu corrected. "And you insulted yourself long before I arrived." Silence fell. The villagers exchanged glances. For the first time, someone had spoken to Bartho without fear. Amaka stepped forward, her voice steady. "You taught me cruelty, uncle, but I learned mercy elsewhere. If you truly want peace, give back not to us, but to the next generation." Bartho looked from her to the watching crowd. Pride wrestled with shame. Finally, his shoulders sagged. "Very well," he said, voice trembling. "I'll do as you ask." He turned and walked away, his once proud stride heavy as stone. That evening, Chinadu and Amaka sat under the same mango tree, where they had once argued, the air scented with ripening fruit. The village around them buzzed softly with talk of what had happened. "Do you think he meant it?" she asked. "Maybe," Chinadu replied. "Maybe not. But his confession wasn't for him, it was for everyone watching. A reminder that no sin stays buried forever." Amaka leaned back against the tree trunk, eyes following a line of birds crossing the orange sky. "You sound like a preacher," he laughed quietly. "No, just a man learning how to be human again." She turned to him, her expression soft. "And what will you build now?" He smiled. "A school. A place for orphans, for girls who were told they're nothing. I'll call it the Hope Center." Her breath caught. "You mean it?" "Yes. And you'll run it, Amaka. You've carried enough pain to know how to heal others." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." He reached for her hand. "You're the strongest person I know." The crickets began their song, and the first stars appeared over Ezenwa. For a long moment, neither spoke. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined them. Then softly she said, "Chinadu, yes, I think I'm late." He frowned. "Late for what?" She smiled through nervous laughter, one hand resting gently on her belly. "For my moon. It's been 2 months." The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. "Amaka." "You mean?" She nodded, eyes bright, with a mix of fear and joy. "We're going to have a child." Chinadu's breath left him in a rush. He pulled her close, laughter and tears tangled in his throat. "After all that loss, life still finds us." Amaka leaned into his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat. "Maybe that's what forgiveness truly is," she whispered, letting life begin again. The mango leaves rustled above them, and somewhere in the distance the drums of Ezenwa began to beat, not for war, not for judgment, but for hope reborn. The sound of the drums echoed softly through the evening, rolling over the green hills of Ezenwa like a heartbeat. Smoke from cooking fires coiled into the air, carrying the scent of yam and palm oil stew. From a distance, the village looked peaceful, but for Amaka and Chinedu, the peace felt fragile like clay that hadn't yet hardened in the Sunday. Days had passed since the moment under the mango tree when she told him she was with child. Every morning she still woke before dawn, her hands instinctively pressing to her belly, her mind whispering prayers to a mother she no longer had. And every night Chinedu lay awake beside her, his heart divided between joy and fear. A child was hope, but it also meant responsibility, permanence, and the end of his wandering revenge. He had chosen peace, yes, but could peace survive in a place still haunted by greed? That morning the sky glowed pink as the rooster crowed. Amaka stood by the fire stirring a pot of pap, while Chinedu packed his farming tools. Papa Oku's voice called from across the compound, old and warm. "Ah, my son, come, I want to show you the new plot for the cassava." Chinedu smiled. "I'll be there soon, Papa." Then turning to Amaka, he said softly, "Don't carry the water today. Let one of the boys help." She laughed. "If I don't work, I'll feel useless." He came close, lowering his voice. "You're carrying our future. Let the world do the heavy lifting for once." Her eyes softened. "You talk like my father used to." He said, "A man's strength is shown not in how much he carries, but in what he protects." Chinedu's chest tightened. "Then I'll protect both of you with everything I have." She reached out and squeezed his hand, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. By midday the sun was cruel again. Dust rose from the road where traders walked to the market. Amaka had gone to teach the children beneath the mango tree, and the small gathering had grown to nearly 20. Little girls scribbled letters in the sand while boys shouted out answers and laughed. "Spell light," Amaka said. A small voice replied, "Light. Very good, Tunde," she cheered, clapping. "Now who remembers what it means?" The children shouted together, "The thing that makes darkness go away." Amaka smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. For the first time since childhood, she felt she belonged not as someone's burden, but as a light herself. Across the road, two women passing by stopped to watch. One of them whispered, "That's the orphan girl who married the stranger." "Yes," the other replied, "but look at her now. She teaches children better than our own schoolmaster." For the first time, the gossip wasn't sharp. It was curious, almost admiring. But peace in Ezenwa always invited envy. At the far end of the market, Auntie Urena sat fanning herself with a piece of cardboard, her face pinched. Her husband, Uncle Bartho, had sold part of his land and donated the money to Chinedu's Hope Center project as promised. The villagers praised him, saying Bartho has changed. But Urena couldn't stand it. "How can they cheer for him?" she hissed, "when it was that boy who shamed us." Mary, her younger daughter, rolled her eyes. "Mama, maybe it's better this way. At least people don't spit when they see us now." "Spit? I'd rather they spit than forget who we are," she snapped. "Do you want to live like beggars?" She looked across the market and her gaze landed on Amaka, radiant under the mango tree, surrounded by laughing children. The sight burned her like acid. "That girl stole our honor," she muttered. "She thinks she's better than us now because she married a man who can fix wells." "She didn't steal anything," Mary said quietly. "You and Papa gave her away." Urena's hand shot out, smacking her daughter across the shoulder. "Mind your tongue, child." But Mary didn't cry. She only looked at her mother with eyes gone cold. "You can't beat truth forever." At sunset, Chinedu returned from the farm, his shirt stained with dirt and sweat. He found Amaka sitting outside their room, her hands resting gently on her belly. The sight stopped him in his tracks. She looked peaceful, glowing, even in the fading light. He sat beside her. "How's my little teacher today?" "Tired," she admitted, smiling. "But happy. The children are learning fast. Even the boys listen now." He nodded, proud. "Soon the whole village will be at your lessons." She turned to him, suddenly serious. "Do you ever regret coming here?" "Never," he said without hesitation. "But you could have stayed in Lagos running your company, living in wealth. Instead you hide here, pretending to be poor." "I came to this village looking for vengeance," he said quietly, "but I found purpose. Wealth without peace is just a cage made of gold." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "And if the truth about who you are spreads again, then let it," he replied. "Let them see that even a man with everything can still bow before love." Her eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve all this." He took her hand gently. "You don't deserve it, Amaka. You earned it with every scar, every tear, every act of kindness they tried to crush." She laughed softly through her tears. "Then our child will know strength before they can even walk." Chinedu smiled, resting a hand over hers. "Our child will know peace. That's all I want." A week later, the Hope Center opened. The villagers gathered near the old well, where a new sign stood tall: Ezenwa Home for Orphans and Women's Skills Training, founded by Chinedu and Amaka Obi. Children clapped, women ululated, and Papa Okwu offered prayers of blessing. Even Bartho came standing awkwardly at the back, guilt written across his face. When it was Amaka's turn to speak, she stood beneath the banner, her voice calm but steady. This place is not built from bricks alone. It is built from forgiveness. Every hand that gives, instead of takes, adds one more stone to its walls. Her words moved the crowd into silence. Even Urena, hidden behind a stall, felt something shift in her chest, though pride kept her from showing it. After the ceremony, a small boy tugged at Chinedu's sleeve. "Sir, will the orphans live here?" "Yes," Chinedu said, kneeling. "Every child without a home will have one here. No one will sleep hungry again." The boy grinned, showing missing teeth. "Then I want to work for you when I grow up," Chinedu laughed. "Then study hard for Madame Amaka. She'll make sure you're ready." Amaka watched them with a heart too full for words. For so long, she had been the one needing rescue. Now she was part of something that rescued others. But even joy has shadows. That night, as the celebrations ended, a strange unease crept through Chinedu's thoughts. He stood on the porch, staring at the moon. Behind him, Amaka lay asleep, one hand over her belly. The future looked bright, but the past had teeth, and it wasn't done biting. His phone buzzed softly on the table. A message blinked across the screen. "Sir, urgent. The board has discovered your absence. Media inquiries spreading. They've traced you to River State. Need instructions." He stared at the message, heart pounding. The truth he had buried for months was rising like a tide. Soon the village would know not just that he was wealthy, but that he was the Chinedu Obi billionaire CEO of Obi Holdings. He looked back at Amaka. She murmured in her sleep, her face serene. He knew the storm coming could shatter that peace. Stepping outside, he whispered to the night, "I will not lose this life again." The wind answered with silence, and the drums of Ezenwa, those steady ancient drums, beat on warning that no secret stays buried under kind soil for long. The next morning, the air over Ezenwa carried a quiet tension. The sky hung low, pale and heavy, as though it too sensed that something was about to shift. Amaka woke first, her body already accustomed to the rhythm of dawn. She rolled onto her side and watched Chinedu, still half asleep beside her. His face, calm in slumber, looked younger, less burdened, almost innocent. But even in his rest, his brow was furrowed as if wrestling ghosts she could not see. She touched his shoulder lightly. "Wake up, husband. The sun waits for no man." He stirred, then smiled. "And yet it still rises every morning, even without me." She laughed soft and musical, then rose to fetch water for washing. He watched her silhouette against the early light, and for a moment gratitude filled his chest. Then, like a shadow slipping under a door, anxiety crept back. He could still see last night's message flashing in his mind. "The board has discovered your absence." How long before the quiet life he'd built here was ripped open? How long before journalists came sniffing around, dragging cameras and questions into a place that barely had electricity? By the time he stepped outside, the compound had come alive with the smell of roasted plantain and the sound of laughter. The orphans from the new center were already sweeping the yard, singing a song Amaka had taught them. "Kind hands build the road, soft hearts make the home." He stopped listening. Their voices, fragile but confident, pierced something deep inside him. He remembered the boy. He had been lonely, angry, burning with vengeance. If only I had met a voice like theirs back then, he thought. Maybe my road would have been shorter. Amaka came out carrying a small pot of pap. "Eat before the field calls you," she said. "I've noticed your strength fades faster these days." He chuckled. "Maybe it's old age." She gave him a mock glare. "Or maybe you worry too much." "What is it you're not telling me?" He froze spoon halfway to his mouth. "Why do you ask?" "And because I can feel it," she said simply. "You've been somewhere else in your mind these past nights. If there's trouble, I want to face it with you." He looked down, guilt twisting through him. Not yet, he thought. Let her rest a little longer inside the peace she built. "It's nothing," he lied gently. "Just tired." She studied him, unconvinced, but decided not to press further. "Then eat more. You'll need strength." Later that day, the village square buzzed with excitement. Two men from Lagos had arrived, strangers in pressed shirts and shiny shoes, clearly out of place among the red dust and laughter of Ezenwa. They carried briefcases and a car that gleamed like a mirror. Children ran after them, shouting, Uncle City, Mama Ig whispered to her neighbor. "These ones look like people who count money for breakfast." The strangers parked near the market and asked the first shopkeeper they found, "Where can we find Mr. Chinedu Obi?" The man blinked. We have many Chinedas. You want the one who farms or the one who sings at weddings? The one who built the orphanage, the taller stranger said impatiently. A woman carrying cassava overheard and pointed down the road. Ah, you mean our teacher's husband? That one is humble. You can't miss him. By the time they reached the orphanage compound, Amaka was outside teaching the children how to plant vegetables. The strangers hesitated at the gate, watching her laugh as the kids buried tiny seeds in the soil. One of them whispered, "That's his wife." "Yes," the other said. "The papers will love her." When Amaka noticed them, she straightened, brushing dirt from her wrapper. "Good afternoon, sirs. Can I help you?" They exchanged glances. "We're here for Mr. Obi." "Is he home?" She frowned. "My husband is at the farm." "What matter brings you? It's urgent business from Lagos," one replied, his tone clipped and formal. "We represent Obi Holdings." The name struck her like lightning. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. "Obi Holdings, yes, ma'am. The company your husband owns." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The children stared wide-eyed, sensing something important had just been spoken. When Chinadu returned an hour later, the men were waiting on the porch, their shoes dusty from the road. He froze when he saw them, his heart plunging. He had hoped for more time, days, maybe weeks, but fate had already kicked down the door. "Sir," the taller one said, stepping forward, "we've been looking everywhere. The board has grown restless. The press got wind of your disappearance. You need to return to Lagos immediately." He sighed heavily. "I told you I needed time. The company will survive without me." "Sir, the company can survive. The truth won't. There are reporters on their way here tonight, maybe tomorrow. If they find you living like this, married to a village girl—" "Enough," he cut in sharply. His tone made the men flinch. "Don't call her that again. Her name is Amaka." Behind him, Amaka stood silently, the pot of cassava soup still in her hands. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. He turned slowly, guilt etched into every line of his face. "Yes." The men stepped aside, awkward, as husband and wife faced each other. The air between them felt thick, unbreathable. "You lied to me again," she said. It wasn't anger that filled her voice, it was exhaustion. "After all we went through, you still hid yourself." "I didn't want this world to touch you," he said desperately. "I came here to heal. I wanted to protect what we built before people turned it into a story." She laughed bitterly. "A story, that's all my life has ever been to others, something to whisper about. I thought with you, it would be different." "Amaka, please." "No," she said, stepping back. "I don't care about your riches or your name. But you made me believe we were equal. You asked me to trust you. How can trust grow in soil full of secrets?" Silence pressed down. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. The men glanced at each other, uncomfortable, and finally muttered, "We'll wait by the car." When they were gone, Chinadu reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I never lied about loving you," he said. "That part is real." Her voice trembled. "Then prove it. Stay." He swallowed. "If I don't go, everything I've built will crumble. Thousands of workers' families depend on me." "And what about this family?" she whispered, one hand instinctively over her belly. The question struck him harder than any accusation. He stared at her, torn clean in two. "Give me 1 week," he said finally. "I'll return and make everything right." "People who leave always say that," she murmured. But she saw the storm in his eyes, and despite her pain she nodded. 1 week, no longer. That night, after he left with the men, the village felt emptier. The room they had shared seemed too quiet, the lantern's glow too small. Amaka lay awake, listening to the wind press against the window, whispering doubts she didn't want to hear. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a storm, gathering far beyond the horizon. She pressed a palm to her belly and whispered, "Your father will come back. He must." At dawn, the village awoke to the distant roar of engines. Black SUVs rolled down the same dirt road that had first carried Chinadu here months ago. Cameras glinted behind tinted glass. Reporters shouted questions before the vehicles even stopped. "Is it true the billionaire is hiding in this village? Who is the mysterious woman living with him?" Mama EJ, watching from her doorstep, shook her head. "Ah, the city has found us at last." By mid-morning, Ezinwa no longer belonged to itself. In Lagos, Chinedu sat in his high-rise office staring at the skyline. The city looked like a glittering monster, beautiful from afar, but always hungry. His assistant handed him a stack of papers, each one filled with headlines. Missing CEO found living among villagers. Love or scandal, billionaire's secret marriage. He dropped the papers onto his desk, the weight of them heavier than steel. He had fought his whole life to control his name, to shape his destiny. But now the truth was no longer his alone. He rose slowly, looking out at the city that had once been his kingdom. You can own the world, he murmured, and still lose your home. Far away in the small village of Ezenwa, Amaka stood on the porch of the orphanage, watching the horizon. Somewhere out there, the man she loved was fighting ghosts of his own making. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, she whispered, not in despair, but in quiet resolve, "Then I will fight for what we've built here until he finds his way back." The drums began again that night, rolling through Ezenwa like thunder carried on hope's breath. Rain arrived that night, like an old visitor, uninvited, persistent, and full of memory. The tin roofs of Ezenwa sang beneath it, and the wind pressed cold fingers through every crack in the walls. Amaka sat by the window, her face half lit by the flame of a kerosene lamp. Beside her, a letter lay unopened, its paper already curling at the edges. It had arrived from Lagos that afternoon, brought by a driver wearing a suit too fine for the red dust of the village. She had wanted to open it immediately, but fear had stopped her hand. What if it said he wouldn't return? What if this was his goodbye, written in polite, distant words? The thought hollowed her chest. Finally, she unfolded it, careful not to tear the edges. "My dearest Amaka, the storm you feared has arrived. The city doesn't forgive secrets, especially when they belong to men like me. Every newspaper calls me a fraud. Every reporter wants to turn our story into their profit. I've denied nothing, because to deny you would be the real lie. They call you the orphan bride. They say I lost my mind in the village, that poverty bewitched me. Let them. I've known power, Amaka, and it never gave me peace. You did. If I can hold on to that truth, then I've already won. Give me a little time. When I return, it won't be to hide again, but to build our life out in the open. Tell the child growing inside you that his father fights not for wealth now, but for honor. Your husband always, Chinedu." The tears came quietly, but they didn't taste of pain. For the first time in weeks, hope felt real again, small, steady, like the lamp that refused to die, even when the wind howled. She folded the letter, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "Come home soon." The following days tested her resolve. Ezenwa, once sleepy and invisible, had turned into a spectacle. Journalists from Lagos, Port Harcourt, even Abuja came with cameras, microphones, and questions that sliced through the peace like knives. "Mrs. Obi," one reporter shouted, shoving a recorder near her face. "Is it true your husband abandoned you?" Another asked, "Did you know he was a billionaire when you married him?" Amaka's eyes flashed. "No, I didn't, but I knew he was kind. That's worth more than gold." Her words made headlines. By evening, village wife defends billionaire husband, kindness worth more than gold. The villagers gathered around the newspaper clippings with awe. "Our Amaka speaks like a queen," someone said. "She's not afraid of city people." But attention was a double-edged blade. It brought admiration and envy. One night, under the flicker of lanterns, Auntie Urena approached her outside the orphanage. Her wrapper was faded, her eyes restless. "So now you are the great Madame Obi," she sneered. "How quickly fortune changes hands." Amaka met her gaze without anger. "Fortune changes, Auntie, but hearts can too." Urena scoffed. "He will forget you. Men like that always do." "Maybe," Amaka said softly, "but if he does, I will still have this." She gestured toward the orphanage, its small windows glowing with lamplight, children laughing inside. "The peace we built doesn't depend on his return." Urena stared at her for a long moment. There was no venom left in her eyes, only exhaustion. "You speak like a preacher," she muttered, then walked away into the dark. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Chinedu faced his own storm. The boardroom at Obi Holdings was a jungle of suits and polished anger. Men who had once bowed to him now spoke his name with disdain. "You've embarrassed this company," one of them said coldly. "Disappearing to marry a village girl while shareholders panic. You've lost your mind." Chinedu leaned forward, eyes burning with calm fire. "You built your empires on fear. I built mine on work, and I'll rebuild it again, this time with a conscience." Another man slammed a fist on the table. "You think morals fix balance sheets?" "No," Chinedu replied evenly. "But they fix men. And when men are fixed, the world follows." Silence spread like oil. He turned to his lawyer. "Prepare the statement. I'm resigning as CEO." Gasps filled the room. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said. "The company will continue without me. But I won't let its greed define my child's future." By evening, the news broke across every major network. Billionaire Chinedu Obi steps down, says he chooses peace over power. His phone buzzed endlessly, but he ignored it. Instead, he packed a small bag, the same one he had carried the first day he walked into Ezenwa, pretending to be a poor farmer. The circle had closed. Back in the village, life carried on beneath the hum of curiosity. Amaka taught her lessons each morning. then spent afternoons expanding the garden behind the orphanage. She worked with the widows who once whispered about her teaching them to weave baskets to sell in the market. The profits went into school books and medicine. Every night she lit a small lantern in the window, a quiet signal to the man she believed would return. "So he can find his way home," she told the children when they asked. Weeks passed, the reporters thinned out. Ezenwa began to breathe again. Then one bright afternoon, as the children played outside, the sound of engines returned, not the harsh roar of journalists this time, but something slower, familiar. Amaka's heart stopped. She stepped out into the sunlight, just as a dust-covered SUV came into view. The door opened and Chinedu stepped out. No suit, no guards, just a simple white shirt and that same quiet strength in his eyes. The children screamed first. Uncle has come back." They ran to him, clinging to his legs. He laughed through tears, lifting one child in each arm. Amaka stood frozen. He crossed the distance slowly, every step heavy with apology. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking, "for hiding, for leaving, for thinking peace could exist anywhere you weren't." Her eyes blurred, but her voice stayed steady. "And what about your empire?" He smiled. "I gave it up. I'd rather build something that can't burn." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped forward, pressing his letter into his hand. "You already did." He opened his mouth to speak, but she silenced him with a kiss, soft, trembling, and full of everything words could not say. The children cheered, clapping wildly. Somewhere a drum began to beat. Papa Okwu appeared from behind the gate, grinning. "Ah, so the prodigal son returns," Chinedu laughed, wiping his eyes. "And this time I'm home to stay." That evening, the village gathered under the big iroko tree. The air smelled of jollof, rice, roasted corn, and rain-washed earth. People danced, sang, and celebrated not wealth but restoration. Amaka stood beside Chinedu as elders offered blessings. "May your love be the well that never runs dry," Papa Okwu declared. Later, when the crowd thinned and the stars spilled across the sky, Chinedu turned to her. "Tomorrow we start something new. A foundation. Schools, homes, hospitals. Everything I once built for profit, I'll rebuild for purpose." Amaka smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've already built the most important thing." "What's that?" "A home where truth lives." He kissed her forehead, then knelt his hand, gently brushing her rounded belly. "And for this little one," he whispered, "the world will be kinder." Above them, the drums of Ezenwa kept playing, deep, ancient, and full of promise. The rain that once drowned the village now smelled of renewal. For the first time since fire stole her family, Amaka felt the air fill her lungs without fear. And for Chinedu, who had spent half his life chasing ghosts, the wind carried only peace. In the distance, the orphanage windows glowed like stars, proof that light once kindled never truly dies. The dry season came to Ezenwa like a blessing. The rains retreated, leaving the earth warm and golden. The cassava fields glowed under sunlight, and laughter echoed across the village as children from the orphanage chased each other around the mango trees. For the first time in years, everything felt settled. Peace had found its way into the soil, and with it came a new rhythm of life. Amaka stood on the porch of the orphanage, her belly now round and full of promise. She wore a light wrapper patterned with blue and gold, her face radiant despite the heat. The children adored her, calling her Mama Hope, because she always told them, hope is something you can plant and watch grow. Behind her, the sound of hammering filled the air. Chinedu was supervising the workers building new classrooms beside the main hall. He had swapped his fine city clothes for a work shirt and slippers covered in dust. Sweat clung to his neck, but his smile was unshakable. "Slowly, my brothers," he called to the builders. "We don't need speed, we need strength. These walls must last longer than we will." Papa Okwu, sitting on a stool nearby, chuckled. "Ah, you sound like an old chief already." Chinedu grinned. "Maybe peace makes a man old. Or wise," the old man said. "But I prefer wise." The two laughed together. Behind them, Amaka approached with a bowl of cool palm wine. "Rest, husband. The sun is fierce today." Chinedu took the bowl, wiping his brow. "You spoil me too much." "Then it's fair," she teased. "You've built a whole school for my children. I can at least offer you palm wine." He took a sip, sighing in satisfaction. "You know, there was a time I thought happiness had to be earned with blood and struggle. Now I see it just needs honesty." Amaka's smile softened. "Honesty and forgiveness. The rest grows naturally." Their hands brushed. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of every hardship they had survived. That afternoon, while Chinedu inspected the new roof beams, a familiar voice called from the road. "Ihi, is this how rich people forget their neighbors?" Chinedu turned and froze. Standing there carrying a small sack of corn was Uncle Bartho. The years had carved regret into the man's face. His once proud shoulders drooped, and his clothes were faded from sun and sweat. The arrogance that once filled his voice was gone. Uncle Chinadu said slowly, "You shouldn't be walking this far in the sun." Bartho forced a weak laugh. "I still have legs, and I came to work. There's no shame in that." Amaka stepped out, startled to see him. He looked at her and lowered his head. "Niece," he said quietly, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. That center you built. My own daughter goes there every morning to learn tailoring. She says you teach her kindness even after what we did." Amaka's heart twisted. For a long moment she couldn't speak. Then she said softly, "There's room here for everyone who wants to start over." Bartho's eyes filled. "You sound like your mother. She was like that, gentle, even when the world was cruel." Chinedu stepped forward, resting a hand on the old man's shoulder. "If you wish to help, come. The roof needs patching." The old man hesitated. "You'd let me work for you. After everything, I'd rather let you work with me," Chinedu replied. "We've all been broken once. The least we can do is rebuild together." Bartho nodded, tears spilling freely. "May God bless you both." And just like that, the man who had once been a villain became another pair of hands shaping a better future. That evening, when the work ended and the light turned copper, the villagers gathered under the Iroko tree. Women brought roasted yam, men drummed on empty barrels, and the children danced barefoot, their laughter rising into the dusk. Amaka sat among them, her feet swollen but her heart light. The baby kicked softly as if joining the celebration. Chinedu stood to speak. "Brothers, sisters, friends, thank you. This land was once filled with fear and greed, but today it beats with love. Let's promise never to forget what brought us here." Cheers erupted. Someone shouted speech from Mama Hope. Amaka laughed, embarrassed, but the crowd insisted. Slowly she rose. Her voice was calm, steady as the drums. "There was a time I thought suffering was my destiny, but pain can be a teacher. It taught me that every scar can become a seed if we plant it in good soil." The villagers murmured in agreement. She continued, "If you want to change the world, start by showing mercy to the person who hurt you. It doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing peace over poison." When she finished, even the children clapped. Tears shimmered in the firelight on faces that had once known only struggle. Later that night, as the crowd drifted away, Amaka and Chinedu sat together watching the stars. The sky was full of them, scattered like diamonds across black velvet. "Do you think the world will ever stop hurting people like us?" she asked softly. Chinedu shook his head. "No, the world doesn't stop hurting, but we can stop bleeding." She leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. "You always know how to turn pain into poetry," he chuckled. "No, you do. I just learned from the best." For a long while they sat in silence, the air cool and full of crickets. The drums faded, replaced by the soft hum of night. Days later, Amaka went into labor. The first pain came in the middle of the night, sharp and sudden. Chinedu woke, instantly, panic flashing across his face. "Breathe," she whispered through clenched teeth. "It's time." They sent for Mama EJ and 2 midwives. The storm outside began as if summoned by fate, rain pounding on the roof, thunder rolling in the distance. For hours, the room filled with shouts, prayers, and the scent of burning herbs. Chinedu paced outside, soaked by rain but refusing to move from the doorway. Every cry from inside tore through him like fire. Finally, near dawn, the door opened. Mama EJ's face broke into a wide grin. A girl, Chinedu, stumbled inside, trembling. Amaka lay exhausted, her skin glistening with sweat. In her arms, wrapped in soft cloth, was a tiny child with dark curls and wide, blinking eyes. "She's perfect," Amaka whispered, her voice fragile with awe. Chinedu knelt beside her, unable to stop smiling. "You did it, my love." "No," she murmured. "We did." He touched the baby's hand. It closed around his finger, impossibly small and strong. "What shall we call her?" Amaka smiled weakly. "Neka. It means mother is supreme, because if not for the mothers before us, we would never have survived." Chinedu nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "Then Neka it is." Outside, the rain stopped. Sunlight streamed through the window, turning everything golden. As the first morning of Neka's life broke, the whole village gathered again, laughing, singing, clapping. The orphanage bells rang, and even the birds seemed to join the celebration. In the midst of it all, Chinedu lifted his daughter high and whispered, "Welcome, my child. You are proof that love outlives every storm." Amaka smiled from her bed, watching the man who had once come to Ezenwa as a stranger now standing as his heart. And when the drums began again, deep, steady, filled with the rhythm of renewal, the sound carried far beyond the village out into the world that had once forgotten them. Morning came softly over Ezinwa, brushing light across the red earth and the roof still wet with dew. Inside the small room, the air smelled of palm oil, soap, and new life. Baby Naneka slept in a basket woven by the village women, wrapped in a soft cloth embroidered with gold thread. Amaka sat nearby humming an old lullaby. Her mother used to sing, her voice low and full of warmth. Chinedu entered quietly, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of pepper soup. For strength, he said. Mama EJ insists you eat before the visitors come, Amaka smiled. Visitors, already? Who's coming? He chuckled, setting the tray down. Half the village, I think. Word spreads faster than lightning here. Everyone wants to see the child who arrived with the rain. She laughed softly. Then we should charge entry fees. He bent down and kissed her forehead. They've already paid with prayers. By noon, the compound was full. Women brought baskets of yam, pap, and cloth. Men came carrying gifts, small ones, humble but heartfelt. Laughter echoed through the air as children peeked into the room, whispering in awe at the tiny baby sleeping soundly. Papa Okwu, wearing his best white agbada, stood under the tree, his walking stick gleaming. Ah, this child will bring blessings, he declared. Rain came with her birth, and rain means life. Mark my words, she will grow wise. The crowd cheered. Amaka, sitting on a mat, watched it all with tears of joy. For years she had been treated as nothing, an orphan, a servant, a burden. Now the same people who once looked away came bearing gifts and blessings. It felt unreal, like living inside a song she never believed she'd hear. Chinedu stood beside her, one arm resting protectively on her shoulder. He greeted everyone with humility, refusing any special treatment. We're all family now, he told them. If one eats, all eat. His words rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. When the noise faded and evening came, the family sat together under the big Iroko tree. Neka slept in her mother's arms. The sky above burned orange, and the drums from the neighboring village carried faintly through the distance. Amaka looked at her husband. Do you ever miss Lagos? He paused, considering. Sometimes the noise, the speed, the endless ambition. But when I think of what it cost me, the silence here feels richer. What cost my peace? He said simply. I spent years chasing power because I thought it would heal what Kelvin stole from me. But power feeds pain. It doesn't cure it. Amaka nodded. And now? Now, he said, glancing at her and their child. I realized everything I needed was waiting in a place everyone else ignored. They fell silent, content to let the crickets and wind finish the conversation. A week later, a black car arrived at the edge of the village. Its sleek body gleamed under the sun, too foreign for Ezinwa's dusty roads. The driver stepped out, holding a briefcase. Good afternoon, he called. I'm looking for Mr. and Mrs. Obi. The villagers, always curious, followed the man to the orphanage compound. Chinedu stepped out of the workshop, wiping his hands. That's us. How may I help? The driver smiled nervously. Sir, I bring news from the city. The investigation into Kelvin Okafor's fraud case is closed. He was sentenced last month. Chinedu's face changed, calm at first, then heavy with a sadness deeper than anger. Sentence, yes, sir. 7 years. He confessed everything before the court. Amaka came to stand beside him, her brow furrowed. And his family, his wife sells food near the bus park now. The daughters, one is married, the other works as a cleaner in Lagos. Silence fell. The villagers murmured, remembering the proud couple who once mocked Amaka. Chinedu exhaled slowly. Justice, perhaps. But it doesn't make me rejoice. Amaka touched his arm gently. Because mercy changes hearts more than punishment. He nodded. Exactly. Then he turned to the driver. Thank you. If they ever need work or shelter, tell them they're welcome here. Let their lesson end with kindness. The man blinked, stunned. You would forgive them. Chinedu's eyes softened. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it keeps it from poisoning the future. When the driver left, the crowd whispered in awe. He forgave the man who ruined him, someone said. Truly, this is not an ordinary man. But Chinedu only smiled. Ordinary men can still choose extraordinary peace. That night, after everyone slept, Amaka walked barefoot to the small garden behind the orphanage. The moon shone full, silvering the leaves and the path. She knelt by the patch of earth where they had planted cassava months before the soil cooled beneath her fingers. Thank you, she whispered to the night, for turning my pain into purpose. She heard footsteps behind her. Chinedu. Talking to your crops again, he teased softly. She smiled. They listen better than most men. He laughed, kneeling beside her. Then tell them I'll need advice on raising our daughter. She'll teach you herself, Amaka said. You'll see. He looked at her, his face lit by moonlight. You always sound like you know the future. I don't, she said, but I know faith. And faith builds futures. They stayed there side by side the quiet night, wrapping around them like a promise. Weeks passed. The orphanage school opened officially with songs, prayers, and laughter. Children from nearby villages came, some barefoot, some shy, all hungry to learn. Amaka taught them reading and writing, while Chinedu showed them how to farm, repair tools, and build things with their hands. The center became more than a school. It became the heartbeat of Ezinwa. Widows found work there teaching crafts. Young men repaired the roofs and painted walls. No one went hungry. One afternoon, as Chinedu fixed a water pump, a reporter from a national paper arrived, this time alone, without the noise of a news crew. Sir, he said, notebook in hand, I covered your story last year. Billionaire hides in village. It went viral. But I returned because the ending wasn't complete. Chinedu looked up. And what ending do you seek now? The truth, the reporter said. Not about your wealth. About why you stayed. Chinedu smiled faintly. Because the city taught me to build walls, but the village taught me to build hearts. And when hearts grow strong, they don't need walls. The reporter wrote in silence. Later that week, his article was published, The Man Who Chose Peace, How a Billionaire Gave Up His Empire to Build a Village. It spread across Nigeria like wildfire. But this time, no one mocked. People sent donations, volunteers, and books. Schools across the country wrote letters to Ezinwa. Amaka held one of those letters close to her heart, a note from a young orphan girl in Ibadan who wrote, When I grow up, I want to be like Mama Hope. Tears welled in her eyes. She sees me, she whispered. Someone sees me now. Chinedu smiled, watching their daughter crawl across the mat. The world finally caught up to the woman I met under the rain. They sat together in the fading light, Neka, between them the air thick with gratitude. Above them, the moon climbed high again, the same moon that had once witnessed their pain, now watching their peace. The night felt endless, yet light. And for the first time in both their lives, there was no unfinished sentence, only continuation. The Harmattan wind returned to Ezinwa, soft and dry, carrying the smell of dust and wood smoke through the narrow paths. It was the season when mornings came wrapped in fog, and evenings whispered through the trees like old songs. The orphanage had grown. Its white walls now stretched beyond the mango grove, and the laughter of children never seemed to stop. Amaka sat under the veranda nursing baby Nneka while reading a letter from the governor's office. Her fingers trembled slightly as her eyes moved down the page. The government had offered to fund more orphanage branches, 3 across the region, under her and Chinedu's name. It was everything they had dreamed of, a chance to multiply hope. Yet something inside her hesitated. When Chinedu walked in from the workshop, she handed him the letter quietly. They want to give us more land and money, she said. They want us to expand. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. This is good news. It is, she admitted. But it scares me. He looked up. Why? Because growth means attention, she said. Attention brings politics, and politics ruins everything good. He nodded, setting the letter down. True. But if we hide what we build, only the darkness grows. Maybe it's time we light other corners of the world. Amaka smiled faintly. You always make it sound simple. It's not simple, he said softly, but it's right. They stood together for a moment, watching children play in the dusty yard. Some of them were new arrivals, orphans from nearby villages brought by relatives who could no longer feed them. Among them was a small boy named Abuka who never spoke. He'd been found wandering alone near a burnt hut, clutching a half-broken wooden horse. Amaka approached him one morning and knelt to his level. Your toy looks brave, she said gently. He blinked but said nothing. You don't have to talk, she continued, but you can always stay. That evening, as she passed by the dormitory, she heard faint humming. It was Abuka singing softly to his toy. She smiled through tears. Healing, she thought, always starts quietly. One afternoon, 2 men in polished shoes arrived again from Lagos, this time not reporters but investors. They sat stiffly in the office Chinedu had built beside the school. Mr. Obi-Wan said, adjusting his glasses, the board from your former company wants to reconcile. They regret the way they treated you after your resignation. They hope you'll return as chairman, if not CEO. Chinedu leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked. And why now? The man hesitated. Because the company is failing. Investors trust your name. A silence followed, heavy and thoughtful. Amaka, who had entered quietly to bring tea, watched her husband's face. His eyes flickered with something she hadn't seen in months, a glint of the man who once commanded boardrooms who built empires. "Tell them," he said finally, "that I've already found a company worth more than theirs." The man frowned. "You're joking, sir." "No," Chinedu said. "It's called humanity. It pays in peace." Amaka smiled, pride softening her features. When the men left, he turned to her. For a moment, the old me almost answered. "But he didn't," she said. "And that's what matters." That evening, under the orange light of sunset, they walked through the village hand in hand. The road was busy, market women returning home goats, bleeding the smell of roasted plantain in the air. Everyone greeted them warmly. Mama Hope, Papa Peace, those were their new names among the people earned, not given. When they reached the riverbank, the air grew cooler. The same river where months ago Chinedu had first fetched water pretending to be a poor farmer. The memory made them both laugh. "Do you ever think," Amaka asked, "about what would have happened if I hadn't offered you that water that day? I would have fallen," he said simply. "Maybe not just to the ground, maybe into bitterness forever. And if I hadn't," he smiled, "then maybe someone else would have saved me, but she wouldn't have made me new." Amaka blushed, pretending to look away. "You talk too much poetry for a farmer. And you talk too much wisdom for an orphan," he teased back. They sat together by the river, listening to frogs croak and distant drums. For a long time, they didn't speak. Then Amaka whispered, "Do you ever wonder if our story will be remembered?" Chinedu's eyes softened. "If peace lives long enough, it always becomes legend." Weeks later, Ezinwa prepared for its annual harvest festival. Bright fabrics hung from trees, drums thumped in every corner, and smoke from roasted yam rose into the evening sky. For the first time, the orphanage children would perform on stage. Amaka had spent days training them, teaching songs about kindness, forgiveness, and hope. Little Ebuka, the once silent boy, had been chosen to lead the chorus. As the performance began, the village gathered in front of the makeshift stage. Lanterns swung in the wind, their flames dancing like spirits. Ibuka stepped forward nervously. Amaka crouched behind him, whispering, "You're brave. Sing for the ones who can't." He nodded, then began softly, "We were seeds under ash. The rain found us, we grew. Love is not thunder. It's the quiet that stays after the storm." His voice, fragile but pure, filled the air. The crowd fell silent. When the song ended, there were tears everywhere, men wiping their faces, women pressing hands to their hearts. Chinedu clapped first. "Well done, my boy," he shouted. The children bowed. Mama EJ sniffed loudly. "Ah, this one will make angels jealous." After the performance, Amaka found Ibuka standing alone by the tree. "You sang beautifully," she said. He looked up shyly. "Mama Hope. Can I stay here forever?" Her eyes shimmered. "As long as you wish, my child. This is your home." Later that night, after the crowd dispersed, Chinedu and Amaka sat outside watching the sky. Baby Nieka slept between them, breathing softly. Fireflies blinked in the dark like scattered stars. Chinedu spoke quietly. "When I first came here, I wanted revenge. Now I only want legacy." Amaka looked at him, curious. "What kind of legacy?" "Not of wealth," he said. "Of warmth. I want every child who passes through these walls to grow believing that goodness is possible. That's a legacy no one can steal." Amaka reached out, taking his hand. "You've already built it." He shook his head. "We built it. Together." A gentle wind swept through the compound, carrying laughter from the children's dormitory. Somewhere far off, the village drummer began a slow rhythm, steady and deep like a heartbeat. Amaka leaned into him. "Listen," she said softly. "The sound of peace." He smiled. "No. The sound of beginnings." They sat there until dawn, the horizon turning pink behind the hills, their daughter stirring between them. The rooster crowed and light spilled across the fields, where yam leaves glistened with dew. In that moment, Ezinwa didn't feel like a small village anymore. It felt like the center of the world, a place reborn through forgiveness, where pain had finally turned into purpose. Chinedu whispered more to himself than to her. "I used to think wealth was measured in land and gold. But this laughter, this child, this peace, this is the only fortune that lasts." Amaka smiled through quiet tears. "Then we are the richest people alive." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as the sun rose higher, painting the world gold again. And together they watched a new day begin, proof that no matter how dark the night, dawn always finds those who choose to keep their hearts open. The morning after the harvest festival, Ezinwa village felt lighter than air. The drums had gone silent, the fires had burned low, but laughter still floated through the wind like perfume. The air smelled of roasted yam and wet soil, and the children's voices echoed faintly from the fields where they now gathered to play. For once there was no gossip, no bitterness, only calm, wide and golden as the morning light. Amaka walked barefoot across the compound, her wrapper swaying gently. Neka, now toddling, clutched her finger, giggling as the soft dust puffed beneath her feet. Each step reminded Amaka of the long road she had walked from the ashes of her childhood home, through years of cruelty and hunger, to this life that still felt like a miracle she dared not wake from. Inside the orphanage, Chinedu was speaking with a group of teachers. The foundation's first new school building was complete in a nearby town, and requests for help kept arriving from every corner of the state. He looked up as Amaka entered, his smile brightening the room. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," she teased. "Are you building schools before breakfast now?" Maybe he laughed. "Hope doesn't sleep much." Amaka handed him a cup of pap. "Drink or Hope will faint." He accepted it, then grew quiet. "The governor's secretary called again this morning. They want to name the main hall after us." Amaka frowned. "That's not necessary. The children's laughter is enough. That's what I told them," he said softly. "But it made me think, when we're gone, what will people remember our names, or the peace we tried to leave behind?" She placed her hand on his. "They'll remember the change, because true legacy doesn't live on buildings, it lives in hearts." Outside, a child screamed joyfully, breaking the moment. They both turned to the window and smiled. Later that day, a visitor arrived. The villagers recognized him immediately, Kelvin's eldest daughter, Mary. She had traveled from Lagos, dusty from the road and trembling with uncertainty. The guards hesitated, but Amaka waved her through. "Let her in," she said gently. Mary's eyes darted nervously as she entered the courtyard. The last time she had been here, she was laughing at Amaka's torn wedding dress. Now she clutched a faded handbag, her once proud face hollowed by hardship. "Good afternoon," she murmured, not daring to meet their eyes. I came to ask for help." Chinedu stood silent. "My father," her voice cracked. "He's ill, very ill. Prison has broken him. Mama and Ife are barely surviving. I've tried to find work, but..." Her voice faded into tears. "We have nothing." The yard fell silent. The children who had been playing nearby stopped to watch, sensing the tension. Amaka exchanged a long glance with her husband. Finally, she walked to Mary and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come inside," she said softly. "You look hungry." Mary broke down, completely sobbing. "Why are you helping me after everything? After how we treated you?" Amaka's voice was calm but steady. "Because someone must end the circle. Pain only multiplies when we keep it alive," Chinedu added quietly. "And because once I wished someone had forgiven me too." They fed her, gave her clean clothes, and prepared medicine to send to her father. Before she left that evening, Mary knelt before them. "You've given me what money could never buy, dignity. I will not forget." Amaka lifted her gently. "Then do the same for someone else one day. That's how mercy grows." As Mary walked away down the dusty road, the villagers whispered among themselves. "The ones who were mocked now give mercy," one said. "Truly God writes stories better than men." Months passed. The orphanage's fame spread beyond the region. Letters arrived from schools, churches, and even government offices, all wanting to visit or learn from Ezenwa's miracle. But Chinedu and Amaka refused to let pride creep in. They kept their days simple, teaching, planting, and sharing meals with the children. One morning, while overseeing a building project near the river, Chinedu slipped on a wet rock. The fall was sudden, the crack of his leg echoing through the valley. When the workers carried him home, Amaka felt her heart freeze. "He'll recover," the doctor said, "but he must rest. No walking for months." Rest, something Chinedu had never known how to do. For weeks he lay in bed, frustration clouding his usually calm face. The world he had built continued to move around him, but he felt helpless watching others carry the load. Amaka refused to let despair grow. Every evening she sat by his bed reading stories aloud, African folktales, parables, lessons of resilience. The children visited daily, bringing drawings and songs. One night, as rain drummed on the roof, Amaka read from an old Igbo proverb book. "A man who cannot dance still moves the crowd if his drum beats true." Chinedu smiled faintly. "So even if I can't walk, my drum still plays." She kissed his forehead. Louder than ever. The weeks of recovery became a season of reflection. He learned to slow down, to listen instead of lead. The children's laughter became his medicine. When he finally stood again using a carved walking stick, the entire village gathered to celebrate. Papa Okwu lifted his voice, shouting, "The lion walks again." Drums thundered. The people danced until sunset, their joy a living prayer. A year later, Ezenwa had transformed. The once-forgotten village had become a beacon, a place where orphans studied, widows worked, and strangers found refuge. Journalists called it the Village of Second Chances. One day, a team from the United Nations arrived. They had heard of the miracle in Nigeria's southeast, a rural couple rebuilding hope through compassion. Their leader, a woman from Ghana, asked to interview Amaka. "What inspired you to start all this?" she asked. Amaka thought for a moment. "Pain," she said, "and the decision not to let it end with me." The interviewer blinked, then whispered, "That may be the most powerful answer I've ever heard." Later, she filmed Chinadu with the children planting new cassava shoots. "Why farming?" she asked. "You could have built offices or hotels." He smiled. "Because you can't eat skyscrapers. And soil never lies. It gives back exactly what you plant." The story went global. Donations poured in. But the Obas didn't buy mansions or cars. They built more homes, more schools, more clinics. Each one bore a single inscription on its entrance: "Kindness builds forever." Years later, on a calm evening, Chinedu and Amaka sat under the old Iroko tree again. Their daughter Naneka, now a teenager, laughed with a group of children near the river. The sun dripped gold across the horizon, and smoke from cooking fires rose lazily into the sky. Chinedu sighed contentedly. "Look how far we've come." Amaka nodded. "And how much we've given away, and still nothing feels lost." He smiled. "That's the secret, isn't it? Love multiplies when it's shared." They sat in silence, listening to the drums begin again, just like the day they first met under the rain. Amaka leaned her head against his shoulder. "If the world remembers us, let it not be for wealth or fame. Let them remember that forgiveness built a home." He squeezed her hand, and that a cup of water changed everything. Above them, stars began to pierce the velvet sky. Children's laughter echoed through the dusk, blending with the steady rhythm of the drums, a song of redemption, of beginnings of love, reborn from ashes. And somewhere between the sound of the wind and the beat of those drums, Ezenwa whispered its own prayer, that the world may never forget the power of mercy. Every storm we survive leaves a seed behind. What grows from it depends on our hearts. Chinedu and Amaka's story reminds us that forgiveness is not weakness. It is courage wearing peace as armor. From the ashes of betrayal, they built a life where kindness replaced cruelty and purpose outshined pain. Wealth can build walls, but compassion builds homes. True greatness lies not in power or riches, but in how we treat those who have nothing to offer in return. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, tell us what lesson you learned from it in the comments below. And if you believe the world needs more stories of kindness and redemption, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, so together we can keep hope alive.